Friends. The word itself is so simple, isn't it? A shared laugh, a late-night phone call, a shoulder to cry on. We form these bonds from childhood through school into adulthood, and some of them we believe are for life. But what if the very foundation of that friendship, the very reason you were drawn to someone, was a cosmic joke of the cruelest kind? What if the person who knew your secrets, the person who was the first to show up in a crisis, wasn't just a friend, but a brother? A brother you were meant to grow up with, a brother who was born into your family, a family that wasn't actually your own. This is a story about two men, both in their early 30s, whose lives were intertwined from the moment they could walk. One, a man named Leo, with a quiet intensity and a passion for old books. The other, Julian, a boisterous and charming extrovert who could light up any room. They were inseparable, a classic odd couple. One was a steady anchor, the other a joyful whirlwind. Their friendship was the kind people wrote songs about. It was pure. It was true. It was, as they believed, a beautiful accident of fate. But it wasn't an accident. Not at all. It was a lie. A quiet, insidious lie that had been festering for over 3 decades, hidden in plain sight. The story begins, as so many do, with a simple, seemingly innocent event. Leo's father, a man named Robert, had been diagnosed with a rare, aggressive form of cancer. The doctors, in a desperate attempt to find any possible treatment, suggested genetic testing for the entire family. It was a routine procedure, a simple blood draw. Leo went, his mother Eleanor went, and even Julian, out of a shared sense of loyalty and concern for Robert, jokingly offered to go. They all laughed about it. Just a quick check, they said. Nothing to worry about. But the results that came back from the lab were not what anyone expected. They were, in a word, impossible. The doctor, a kind but visibly shaken woman, called Leo first. Her voice was strained, her words carefully chosen. "Leo," she said, "there's a discrepancy in the genetic markers. Your father, he's not your biological father." A wave of nausea hit Leo. He sat down, the world tilting. It was a mistake. It had to be. He was the spitting image of his father. The same deep-set brown eyes, the same crooked smile. He even had a small birthmark on his left wrist, a birthmark his father had pointed out to him as a young boy, saying, "That's how I know you're mine, son. We're a perfect match." But the tests didn't lie. Robert, the man who had taught him how to fish, how to change a tire, how to be a good man, wasn't his father. The blood in his veins was from a stranger. The knowledge was a physical blow, a sudden and brutal upending of his entire reality. His entire identity was a lie. He broke the news to his mother, Eleanor. Her reaction wasn't shock, but a profound, gut-wrenching grief. She didn't deny it. She couldn't. She just held his hand, tears streaming down her face, and whispered, "I'm so sorry, my son. I should have told you." But she couldn't bring herself to explain the why. Not yet. The pain was too fresh, too raw. Then the second shoe dropped. The lab, in a clerical error that would change everything, had accidentally sent Leo a copy of Julian's genetic test results. Julian, who had been tested at the same time, was also a biological match for Robert. The world stopped. The air left Leo's lungs. Julian, his best friend since kindergarten, the man who knew him better than anyone, was Robert's biological son. The puzzle pieces clicked into place, but they formed a picture of a nightmare. Julian had been born to his parents. He was the one who was supposed to have a small birthmark on his wrist. He was the one who was supposed to be the spitting image of his father. Leo looked at his own wrist, at the birthmark, and for the first time, he saw it not as a sign of love, but as a cruel cosmic joke. A mark left by a stranger. He wasn't the son of Robert and Eleanor. Julian was, and that meant Leo was the son of Julian's parents. He looked at the test results, then at his own trembling hands, and a single horrifying thought echoed in his mind. He wasn't just swapped at birth. He was swapped with his best friend. The silence that followed the revelation was deafening. It wasn't just a secret between two men. It was a ghost that had haunted two families for over 3 decades. Leo had to process an impossible truth. His life, the life he had known, was a carefully constructed facade. The memories he cherished, family dinners, holidays, even the way his mother would run her hand through his hair when he was sick, were built on a foundation of a lie. He had lived in a house that wasn't his home, with a family that wasn't his own. Julian, on the other hand, was oblivious. He was still the same loud, happy-go-lucky man, completely unaware that his life, too, was a lie. He had grown up with parents he adored, David and Maria, a kind-hearted couple who had always given him everything. Julian had their bright, almost electric blue eyes, a feature that was a constant topic of conversation among friends and family. "He's a true Taylor," they'd say, but a small part of him had always felt different. He couldn't quite place it, but he had always felt a strange sense of belonging when he was with Leo's family. He loved the quiet comfort of their home, the intellectual conversations with Robert, the way Eleanor would always make sure he had a hot meal when he was over. It was a second home, a sanctuary. He had always dismissed it as just a close friendship, a strange, inexplicable gravitational pull. The irony was staggering. The two boys, unknowingly drawn to their true families, had orbited each other for a lifetime. They had attended the same schools, played on the same sports teams, even dated the same girl for a brief, awkward period in high school. The universe, it seemed, had a twisted sense of humor. Leo finally mustered the courage to confront his mother, Eleanor. The conversation was agonizing. She wept as she explained the circumstances. It had happened in the hospital. The maternity ward had been chaotic, understaffed. Two babies, both born on the same day, in rooms just a few feet apart. Leo and Julian. They had been given identical wristbands, and in the confusion of the hospital, the wristbands were accidentally swapped. A simple, devastating mistake. But the story didn't end there. Robert, a man of quiet honor, had discovered the mistake shortly after they brought the baby home. He had seen the mismatched wristband, had noticed the tiny birthmark that didn't belong on Julian. He confronted Eleanor, his heart in his throat. What were they to do? They couldn't just give the baby back. They had already fallen in love with him. They had named him Julian. He was their son. They decided to keep the secret to protect themselves and to protect Julian from the truth. They told themselves it was for the best, that the baby would be happier growing up in a loving home, a home they had worked so hard to build. Meanwhile, Julian's parents, David and Maria, had been left in the dark. They had taken their new son, Leo, home, believing he was their own. They too had fallen in love with him instantly. They never questioned his lack of physical resemblance, instead chalking it up to a genetic quirk. They were so consumed with the joy of new parenthood that the thought of a mistake never even crossed their minds. They had named him Leo. They had loved him fiercely, unconditionally. The more Eleanor spoke, the more the pieces fell into place. The strange, subtle moments. The way Leo had always felt a connection to Julian's family, even as a child. The way he had been drawn to the warmth of their home, the easy laughter that filled their living room. He had always felt like an outsider, a guest in his own life, but he had never been able to articulate it. Now he knew why. He was a guest. He was an interloper. He looked at an old family photo, a picture of him as a young boy, maybe 5 or 6, sitting on Robert's lap. They were both smiling, their eyes crinkled at the corners. The same eyes, the same smile. But it was a lie, a beautiful, heartbreaking lie. Leo now had to make a choice that would change not only his life, but Julian's, and the lives of both families. Should he tell Julian the truth? Should he rip apart the delicate fabric of their lives, the friendships, the relationships, the very foundation of their identities? Or should he keep the secret, just as his parents had, and live with the burden of this horrifying truth for the rest of his life? The weight of the secret was crushing. For days, Leo walked around in a daze, a ghost in his own life. He looked at Julian and saw not just his best friend, but the man who was supposed to be him. He saw the easy camaraderie, the effortless connection Julian had with Robert, and it felt like a dagger to his heart. It was a bond he had always craved, a bond he had always felt was just out of his reach. Now he knew why. It was because it was never meant for him. He had to tell him. He couldn't live with this. It wasn't just about him anymore. It was about Julian, about the truth he had a right to know. But how do you tell your best friend that his entire life is a lie? That the man he calls dad isn't his biological father, and that you are the son of the parents he grew up with? Leo decided to do it gently. He asked Julian to meet him at a quiet park they used to frequent as kids. The air was crisp, and the leaves were changing color, a stark contrast to the emotional turmoil inside them. Julian, ever the optimist, was in high spirits. "What's up, man? You've been quiet all week. Everything okay with your dad?" Leo looked at him, his heart pounding in his chest. "Julian, I have something I need to tell you. It's complicated." He started with the genetic test. He explained how Robert's diagnosis had led to the discovery, how he wasn't Robert's son. Julian's face went pale. He listened intently, his usual boisterous energy completely gone. He was still processing this new reality, a reality where his best friend wasn't the biological son of the man he considered a second father. Then Leo dropped the second bomb. "And, Julian, the lab made a mistake. They sent me your results too. Julian, you are a match for Robert." The words hung in the air, suspended in a silent, agonizing moment. Julian's eyes, those bright blue eyes that were a signature of his supposed family, filled with an unreadable mix of confusion, shock, and dawning horror. He looked at Leo, then at his own hands, then back at Leo, searching for a sign, for an explanation, for a way to make sense of the nonsensical. "No," Julian whispered, his voice trembling. "No, that's impossible. My parents are David and Maria." "I know," Leo said, his voice cracking with emotion. "I know. And they are my biological parents." Julian stood up abruptly, a look of wild disbelief on his face. "Are you kidding me? Is this some kind of sick joke?" "No," Leo said, tears welling up in his eyes. "I wish it were. Julian, we were switched at the hospital. 32 years ago. I was supposed to be your parents' son, and you were supposed to be mine." The words were a physical blow. Julian staggered back, as if he had been punched. He looked at Leo, at the man he had called his brother for 3 decades, and saw a stranger. He saw the face of the man who had stolen his life. He saw the life he was supposed to have, the family he was supposed to have. And in that moment, the years of friendship, the shared memories, the laughter, the tears, all of it felt like a lie, a beautiful, heartbreaking lie. He turned and ran, leaving Leo alone in the park, the leaves rustling around him like a whisper of a forgotten life. He ran to his parents' house, his heart a raw, bleeding wound. He confronted David and Maria, and their faces, filled with love and confusion, were the last straw. The truth was too much. The pain was too great. The betrayal was too deep. The families, once so close, were now 2 warring factions, torn apart by a secret that had been kept for too long. The 2 men, once inseparable, were now strangers, a chasm of a shared past and a stolen future separating them. The story of Leo and Julian wasn't just a story about a mistake. It was a story about identity, about fate, about the fragile nature of what we call family. The fallout was catastrophic. Julian's first reaction was a profound sense of anger and betrayal. He couldn't bring himself to talk to Leo, to the man who he now saw as a symbol of the life he lost. He couldn't look at his own parents, David and Maria, without feeling a confusing mix of love and resentment. They hadn't lied to him, not intentionally, but they had lived a lie, and by extension, so had he. The most painful part for Julian was the realization that he was living the life that was meant for Leo. He had grown up with a family that he now saw as a substitute. The parents who had loved him, who had supported him, were not his own. The memories, the traditions, the very fabric of his childhood. It all felt a little less real now. The vibrant blue eyes, the easy charm, all of it was a testament to the family he didn't belong to. Leo, meanwhile, was in his own private hell. The parents who had raised him, Eleanor and Robert, were heartbroken. Robert's health deteriorated rapidly, the stress of the revelation compounding his illness. Eleanor, racked with guilt, tried to reconnect with Julian, to explain, to apologize, but Julian refused to see her. The man who had been a second son to them was now a stranger. The silence was deafening. But as time passed, a strange thing began to happen. The anger began to fade, replaced by a quiet, simmering grief. Julian, in his solitude, began to reflect on his life. He remembered the quiet afternoons with Robert, talking about books and history. He remembered the deep conversations he and Leo had shared, the feeling that they were two halves of the same soul. And he began to realize that blood wasn't the only thing that made a family. He finally reached out to Leo, not with anger, but with a simple, desperate text. "Can we talk?" They met at the same park, the same spot where the truth had been revealed. The air was different now, heavy with unspoken words, but also with a quiet understanding. They didn't talk about the past. They didn't talk about who belonged where. They talked about the present, about the grief they were both experiencing, about the difficult path ahead. Julian confessed that he had felt like an outsider his whole life, an echo of a life he never had. Leo admitted the same, a constant feeling of longing he couldn't explain. They were two lost boys, finally finding their way back to each other, not as friends, but as something deeper, something more complicated. As brothers, Robert's condition worsened. He had one last wish, to see Julian. Julian, his heart in his throat, went to the hospital. He saw the man who was both a stranger and a father, a man who had loved him unconditionally. He saw the resemblance, the deep-set brown eyes that he had always seen as a reflection of Leo's, but which he now saw as his own. They didn't need to speak. A single nod, a shared look, was enough. A lifetime of unspoken love was exchanged in that single, poignant moment. After Robert passed, the two families began the slow, painful process of healing. Julian reconnected with Eleanor, finding in her not just a biological mother, but a woman who had carried a secret burden for a lifetime. She, in turn, found a son she had lost and a son she had gained. Leo began to form a relationship with David and Maria, his biological parents, a couple who had loved him fiercely but had never truly known him. It was awkward at first, a dance of two families trying to merge into one. But love, they found, was a powerful force. The story of Leo and Julian is a testament to the fact that family isn't just about blood. It's about love. It's about the people who show up, who stay, who love you for who you are, flaws and all. The universe may have made a mistake, but in that mistake, it created a bond that was stronger than any bloodline. They were a family, forged not by birth, but by fate. They were brothers twice over. It makes you think, doesn't it? About the people in your life, about the connections you have, about the possibility that fate, in its infinite wisdom, has a plan far bigger than we can ever imagine. If the story touched you, if it made you think about the true meaning of family and connection, please like this video. Subscribe to our channel for more stories of human resilience and the incredible mysteries of life. And don't forget to hit the notification bell so you don't miss our next chapter. We're on this journey together.